Welcome to Allies or Enemies. This time, we are looking at the Tiny Epic series of games. Designed by Scott Elms, Tiny Epic games all come in small boxes, all play for at least 2 to 4 players, are generally fairly easy to learn, and usually play in less than 40-ish minutes. But that is where the similarities end. Each game in the Tiny Epic series takes on very different mechanics and themes, often boiling down a popular style into a small but full package. Like a TARDIS, these are bigger on the inside. From 4X to worker placement to co-op to pick up and deliver to all sorts of things, and we have played them all, although only at 2 players. And with all of that in mind, here is our list counting down our personal favorites.
Number 10, Tiny Epic Tactics. If you've ever played video games like Fire Emblem or Shining Force, you will have a pretty good idea of what is going on here. This is kind of a dudes on a map game, but with that grid area control thing that defines tactics games. Each player has a team of 4 different characters, and they move around a 3D map fighting and trying to capture goals. On the plus side, there are a bunch of characters. The map build is clever and the skirmish rules work pretty well. That said, it feels too light and far too quick for what it is. And for a dudes on a map game, there are neither enough dudes nor enough map. This may, however, be one that works better for 3 or 4 players, or just one that works better for people that specifically love tactical skirmish games.
Number 9, Tiny Epic Mechs. Tiny Epic Mechs is kind of an amalgam of action programming and area control. It's all set up like some kind of future mech battle sport where you need to set up traps and grab weapons in an arena. And it all looks very cool. When we took this out of the box, we were wowed. The mech suits are awesome, the weapons are rad, and it all has a cool, fun style. Unfortunately, however, the parts don't quite come together. The rock, paper, scissors style battle system is a bit simple. The mech suits and weapons are a bit fiddly, and the point scoring system feels a bit off. Again, it may work better with the craziness of 4 players, and there are some cool parts here, but they just don't all mesh quite right as a whole.
Number 8, Tiny Epic Pirates. One of the most recent Tiny Epic games, Tiny Epic Pirates is also one of the best looking. Players each control a pirate ship sailing the high seas as they plunder and sell goods, fight merchants, hire crews, and bury treasure. The ocean map looks great. The variable action selection wheel is a smart mechanic, and a lot of this game is a lot of fun. It's basically straight pick up and deliver, and kind of a race to sell goods, get gold, and bury that gold. And in that respect, it works, but it does have more downtime than most Tiny Epic games, and more importantly, there isn't enough piratey stuff. We wish the bad guy stuff like sinking merchants was worth a little bit more, and that there were a few more ways to cause mayhem. If this was renamed Tiny Epic Merchants, it would have met our expectation. On a pirate rating scale, this gets an R out of R.
Number 7, Tiny Epic Kingdoms. The one that started it all, Tiny Epic Kingdoms takes on a hefty challenge by attempting to bring a 4X experience into a tiny box with only a few components. And it does a commendable job of it, as players do explore the lands, expand their race's reach, exploit those lands for various resources, and exterminate opponents in battle. The game centers on a clever action selection system that allows opponents to either follow or collect resources each turn, which keeps everyone involved. And it even has a sizable deck of asymmetrical fantasy races, all with their own tech-style tree of abilities. Visually, it is all a bit dated, but mechanically, it is an impressive feat. There are, however, a few paths that are consistently better than others, and you do really need to have the second edition of the game, or at least use the second edition rules, as the original has a few key flaws. But it was a heck of a starting point for the series.
Number 6, Tiny Epic Western. Tiny Epic Western might be the most divisive game in the Tiny Epic series. We had a lot of trouble placing this one. This Western-themed game mashes up worker placement and set collection with poker, and it's that last part that is not everybody's cup of tea. Each round, players first mosey their posses to gather resources, take actions, and get messed up in shootouts. Then they see who runs the town and gets extra resources through a game of 3-card stud in which everyone has one hidden card. Then they use those resources to buy cards and collect icon sets. It's a bit of a mishmash that comes together just fine for some and feels extremely disconnected for others. That poker section in particular introduces maybe the largest random element of any Tiny Epic game. And even knowing when to hold 'em and when to fold 'em won't help if the card gods are against you, which can make or break this game. Back on the plus side though, the theming's terrific, the asymmetric characters are fun, and the bullet dice are amazing. This is a mixed bag, but there are a lot of nice touches here.
Number 5, Tiny Epic Defenders. The second Tiny Epic game and the first co-op game had a bit of a similar path to its predecessor, with a much improved second edition, which we hear is further improved with the expansion, although we haven't had a chance to try that so far. Tiny Epic Defenders is classic co-op. Players are moving around trying to manage threat levels under increasingly challenging conditions. Here the challenge is an army of monsters, and the heroes are an asymmetrical band of dwarves, elves, and Randall the fiddle player. It all runs on a simple card system that has players moving around the card-based lands, biding their time until one of the big bads comes out for the final battle. It does have some nice variation in both the main threats and the asymmetrical heroes, but unfortunately the play in the central lands can be a bit samey after a while. Still, it is quick and fun and fills a nice niche for a quick co-op. Also, this was the first Tiny Epic game to introduce the popular item meeples that hold actual items.
Number 4, Tiny Epic Zombies. The newer of the Tiny Epic co-op games takes the genre in a decidedly different direction from Defenders. Tiny Epic Zombies is bigger, it's flashier, and it has a lot of variability. First of all, it isn't just co-op, as there's also semi-co-op and competitive modes, some with players taking the role of the zombies. It also has a lot of levers to move as you mix in 3 of 9 different objectives each game and choose from a bunch of survivors/zombies. The zombie boss powers in particular can really swing things up and down the difficulty spectrum. Plus, the weapons are really cool. This is all very much an ode to George A. Romero and the classic Zombies in a Mall movie, Dawn of the Dead. On a zombie rating scale, this one gets a solid R out of R.
Number 3, Tiny Epic Quest. While the Tiny Epic games in general do feel like full games just in small boxes, that is perhaps more true for Tiny Epic Quest than for any of the others. This worker placement-ish adventure game is Zelda in a box. And boy, oh boy, is it ever Zelda. The card art, the weapons, the Triforce, the dungeons, this is really an unbranded adventure through Hyrule. The game has 2 phases. In the day, you are positioning your adventures for exploring and goblin fighting and magic learning. And then at night, you are actively doing all of those quests through dice rolling. Perhaps the coolest thing about it is that everyone is always active on every turn. No matter who is choosing the movement card or rolling the dice, you are always taking part, and that does make for a pretty engaging experience. The actual adventures are all simple dice rolls, so they can get a bit samey, but for a tiny game, it is no doubt pretty epic.
Number 2, Tiny Epic Dinosaurs. Tiny Epic Dinosaurs is sneakily a classic Euro farming game dressed in dinosaur clothing, and the choice is fantastic. It's half worker placement game where you're gathering food and building your ranch and also catching and growing dinosaurs, and half dino ranching game where you're breeding and feeding dinos in hopes of fulfilling contracts. There's a clever and tight resource mechanic here that makes you balance growing too many dinos with growing enough food, and there is a lot of interaction, both in racing to spaces and getting to those contracts. Plus, it has maybe the highest number of unique dinosaur sculpts of any game, in a big example of over-delivering to the extreme. There are different sculpts for the main 4 breeds, and then also individual sculpts for every single purple special dinosaur. These board game designers were so preoccupied with whether they could that they didn't stop to think if they should. But I'm really glad that they did.
Number 1, Tiny Epic Galaxy. Sometimes the obvious choice is the obvious choice for a reason. Tiny Epic Galaxy is really the game that put this series on the map and is still the one that we play the most. It is such a terrific blend of simplicity and strategy. Each turn, you roll the action dice and then take your actions. Flying to planets, researching, building your civilization, and collecting resources along the way. There are so many great touches in the design, the way you level up to gain new ships and dice, the decks of game end goals and individual planets, and of course the follow mechanic that adds an extra layer to every choice. It also helps that it is one of the few Tiny Epic games that is actually travel size once it's on the table, with the least amount of setup in the series. All of which make it our choice for number 1.
And that is it. Which are your favorites in the Tiny Epic series? And is there another small box series that you are a fan of? Please let us know in the comments. Also, please do like and subscribe. And hopefully, we will see you all next time for another game.